Hello again and welcome. My name is Steve Petersen and I am the chair of Minnesota Atheists. On this program, Day of Reason 2007, we are going to recreate some of the speeches we gave at the Minnesota Capitol Rotunda. We did the same thing last year, and these speeches are done for our cable cast. But also, if you want to see the live event, you can go to our website, mmatheist.org, and you can see the podcast. But here we're going to recreate some of the speeches as they were given by some of our members for our cablecast program. And throughout the program you might see some contact information, and if you're interested in us, we're always interested in you, so contact us if you are so inspired. And this will be a little bit different format, as we'll have some folks come in and work off of a standing mic. But joining me on set here is George Kane. George Kane is the president of Minnesota Atheists. And George has a speech that he gave in the Rotunda, and he's going to give the speech in the exact same manner that he did. So you folks watching, just think of yourself as sitting in the Minnesota State Capitol Rotunda and listening to George Kane. George?
Thank you, Steve. Outside, there's a celebration of the Day of Prayer. In response, we are celebrating inside the Rotunda with a selection of historic readings that honor the separation of church and state. These opposing events reflect an objective division in American society, a divergence of values and outlook on the world. It is a characteristically American occasion that these two opposing groups would hold events for political expression peacefully at the same time and place. Around the world and throughout history, religious diversity has usually resulted in civil discord, often in war. Religion defines political factions, each intent on assuming social and political dominance. Whatever specific issues focus their confrontation, the underlying objective is always for religion to stamp the national government with its identity. Everywhere this happens, wherever a nation assumes the identity of a religion, domestic tranquility requires repression of minorities. Consequently, life is heavily burdened for Christians living in Muslim nations, for example, and for minorities of conscience wherever there is a state religion. The United States has been spared the worst political discord of religious diversity because it was founded at a peculiar moment of history, with religious wars in Europe fresh in their memory, and inspired by the deist movement that was spawned by the Enlightenment. Our founding fathers established in law a separation of church and state. Article 6 establishes the constitutional law that no religious test shall be required as a qualification to any office under the United States. The First Amendment states that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. The 14th Amendment extends these restrictions to all levels of government. These provisions guarantee that America will remain a secular nation, favoring no religion over any other, nor favoring religion over non-religion. No religion will be able to stamp its identity on government, ensuring a society in which all religions, all beliefs, all values, and all worldviews will be able to compete on their merits in an impartial marketplace. This event is organized by Minnesota Atheists, but separation of church and state is equally important to religious minorities to secure their values and conscience from government coercion. Without question, more people have turned out for the Day of Prayer event outside than have joined us here in the Rotunda. Nevertheless, Minnesota Atheists has every confidence that reason and our rational humanist values will, in this fair and open marketplace, prevail over superstition and myth. I want to personally acknowledge and thank everyone who has come to this event, whether to participate with a reading from the lectern or merely to observe. Your presence lets our legislators know, as they consider bills that come before them, that their constituents are vigilant for the appearance of religion in law. But the National Day of Prayer has been recognized by government proclamation in 49 states, despite its political divisiveness, breaching the restriction on government endorsement of religion. Our presence here today is a reminder to our government of the people, of this annual breach. Steve.
Well, we get to give you a hand. There were in the Capitol Rotunda. There was a lot of hand and a lot of clapping and a lot of cheering. And now I'd like to bring in Mike Haubrich. He has a quote from John Adams that really was in defense of our constitutional government and separation. Mike?
All right, thanks, Steve. And actually, it was President Thomas Jefferson.
Oh, I'm sorry, I've got it wrong.
Several sentiments in this regard, but it was a letter to Reverend Samuel Miller, who in 1808 had asked Jefferson to issue a proclamation for a National Day of Prayer. So he responded thus: I consider the government of the United States is interdicted by the Constitution from intermeddling with religious institutions, their doctrines, discipline, or exercises. This results not only from the provision that no law shall be made respecting the establishment or free exercise of religion, but from that also which reserves to the states the powers not delegated to the United States. Certainly no power to prescribe any religious exercise, nor to assume authority in religious discipline has been delegated to the general government. It must then rest with the states as far as it can be in any human authority, but it is only proposed that I should recommend, not prescribe, a day of fasting and prayer. That is, that I should directly assume to the United States an authority over religious exercises which the Constitution has directly precluded them from. I do not believe it is for the interest of religion to invite the civil magistrate to direct its exercises, its discipline, or its doctrines, nor of the religious societies that the general government should be invested with the power of effecting any uniformity of time or matter among them. Every religious society has the right to determine for itself the times for these exercises and the objects proper for them, according to their own particular tenets, and this right can never be safer than in their own hands, where the Constitution has deposited it. I am aware that the practice of my predecessors may be quoted, but I have ever believed that the example of state executives led to the assumption of that authority by the general government without due examination, which would have discovered that what might be a right in a state government was a violation of that right when assumed by another. Be that as it may, everyone must act according to the dictates of personal conscience, and mine tells me that civil powers alone have been given to the President of the United States and no authority to direct the religious exercises of his constituents.
Thank you. Well, George, in today's time, as you had commented, there was only one governor out of 49 that followed Thomas Jefferson's lead.
Right, the governor of New York.
The governor of New York.
New York State.
Oh. Well, Matthew Richardson, the Secretary of Minnesota Atheists, gave a speech today. And Matthew, welcome to the program.
Thank you. I have a quote from Paul Kurtz, who's the editor of Free Inquiry magazine. President George W. Bush called John Paul II a champion of human freedom. The U.S. media repeated the mantras that the Pope was the greatest person on earth in the 20th century, an extraordinary defender of human rights and the moral authority of our time. Well, let's see. Let's look at some examples of John Paul's idea of equal rights. John Paul II was an adamant opponent of women's rights, at least within the church, refusing their ordination, and he opposed divorce, reproductive freedom, contraception, abortion, and artificial insemination. He was an implacable foe of the Death with Dignity movement and its advocacy for euthanasia and assisted suicide, which struggled to offer the incurably ill merciful release from their suffering and pain. The Catholic Church delights in human suffering. He insisted upon a celibate priesthood, though the Church did not practice celibacy during its first 1,000 years. He was also a strong foe of stem cell research, on the arcane theological premise that the soul is implanted at the moment of conception or of the first division of cells in a petri dish, in spite of the consequent positive benefits that may accrue to humankind from stem cell research. On his many trips to Asia and Africa, he insisted that condoms not be used, and he argued for abstinence. These policies, no doubt, caused millions of deaths from AIDS and contributed to population growth in the Third World. Well into the 20th century, the Roman Catholic Church explicitly opposed democracy and human freedom in various parts of the world. Indeed, it still demands subservience from believers, defends its own authority as potentially infallible, and harshly discourages dissent about its theology. Moreover, it has consistently attempted to breach the separation of church and state wherever it has amassed enough power to do so. For example, seeking public funding for Catholic schools and hospitals. Many Roman Catholic hospitals deny reproductive and contraceptive services to women, even if they are urgently requested. What is so ominous in the United States for secular humanists is the alliance today between conservative Roman Catholics and evangelicals. Working together, they have been emboldened to attack secularism and the First Amendment as never before. A whole line of right-wing conservative commentators in the media, such as Bill O'Reilly and Sean Hannity, venomously castigate secularism. Like Soviet apologists from an earlier era, they seek to rewrite history by claiming that the U.S. Constitution is rooted in monotheism and the Bible. They overlook the fact that the Constitution is a thoroughly secular document and that the First Amendment is the first clear statement on a national level of the separation of state and church.
Thank you, Matthew. Well, George, Matthew really has a quote that really establishes why people like us go to the state capitol. Does it?
Sure. We have to be vigilant, always, against the effect of religion on legislation, because it really is a different mindset. They're not looking for the results being to the benefit of society, but to be in conformance with religious doctrine.
I'd like to introduce Shirley Moll. Shirley Moll has a quote from Matilda Jocelyn Gage that talks about this battle that has been going on from a long time. If you could tell what the book is from and the date.
Yes,
Shirley?
This is a quotation from Matilda Jocelyn Gage, written in her book, Woman, Church, and State, which was published in 1893. Looking forward, I see evidence of a conflict more severe than any yet fought by Reformation or science, a conflict that will shake the foundations of religious belief, tear into fragments and scatter to the winds the old dogmas upon which all forms of Christianity are based. It will not be the conflict of man with man upon rights and systems. It will not be the conflict of science upon church theories regarding creation and eternity. It will not be the light of biology illuminating the hypothesis of the resurrection of the body, but it will be the rebellion of one half of the church against those theological dogmas upon which the very existence of the church is based. In no other country has the conflict between natural and revealed rights been as pronounced as in the United States. And in this country where the conflict first began, we shall see its full and final development. During the ages, no rebellion has been of like importance with that of women against the tyranny of church and state. None has had its far-reaching effects. We notice beginning, its progress will overthrow every existing form of these institutions. Its end will be a regenerated world. Thank you.
Well, that's she was fighting the battle 100 and some years before the Pope. Pope John Paul got up in Matthew's quote right before.
Yeah. Religion always has a conservative role in society. Religion always seems to be the instrument of repression of women, of maintaining established social orders. And so it's the duty of the responsibility of atheists to be a liberalizing force in society.
Well, our next speaker is Frederick Roos, and Frederick has a speech from Robert Kennedy given in 1960, is that correct, about? And just imagine a president today giving this speech. It's extraordinary. Frederick?
The year is correct. It's John F. Kennedy.
John F. Kennedy.
Said that, yes. When John F. Kennedy was running for president in 1960, he was attacked on the basis of his religion. No Catholic had been elected president before, and his detractors claimed that he would follow the wishes of the Pope over the national interest. He responded to those charges with the following speech made on September 12, 1960, to the Greater Houston Ministerial Association. As you listen to these excerpts, try to imagine any candidate for president today, Republican or Democrat, making such a strong statement in support of the separation of church and state. This is what John F. Kennedy said. I believe in an America where the separation of church and state is absolute, where no Catholic prelate would tell the president, should he be Catholic, how to act, and no Protestant minister would tell his parishioners for whom to vote, where no church or church school is granted any public funds or political preference, and where no man is denied public office merely because his religion differs from the president who might appoint him or the people who might elect him. I believe in an America that is officially neither Catholic, Protestant, nor Jewish, where no public official either requests or accepts instruction on public policy from the Pope, the National Council of Churches, or any other ecclesiastical source, where no religious body seeks to impose its will directly or indirectly upon the general populace or the public acts of its officials. I believe in an America where religious intolerance will someday end, where all men and all churches are treated as equal, where every man has the same right to attend or not attend the church of his choice, where there is no Catholic vote, no anti-Catholic vote, no block voting of any kind, and where Catholics, Protestants, and Jews at both the lay and pastoral level will refrain from those attitudes of disdain and division which have so often marred their works in the past, and promote instead the American ideal of brotherhood. That is the kind of America in which I believe, and it represents the kind of presidency in which I believe, a great office that must neither be humbled by making it the instrument of any one religious group, nor tarnished by arbitrarily withholding its occupancy from the members of any one religious group. I believe in a president whose religious views are his own private affair, neither imposed by him upon the nation or imposed by the nation upon him as a condition to holding that office. I would not look with favor upon a president working to subvert the First Amendment's guarantees of religious liberty, nor would our system of checks and balances permit him to do so. And neither do I look with favor upon those who would work to subvert Article 6 of the Constitution by requiring a religious test, even by indirection, for it. I want a chief executive whose public acts are responsible to all groups and obligated to none, who can attend any ceremony, service, or dinner his office may appropriately require of him, and whose fulfillment of the presidential oath is not limited or conditioned by any religious oath, ritual, or obligation. I ask you tonight to follow in that tradition, to judge me on the basis of my record of 14 years in Congress, on my declared stands against an ambassador to the Vatican, against unconstitutional aid to parochial schools, and against any boycott of public schools. Whatever issue may come before me as president on birth control, divorce, censorship, gambling, or any other subject, I will make my decision in accordance with these views, in accordance with what my conscience tells me to be the national interest and without regard to outside religious pressure or dictates. And no power or threat of punishment could cause me to decide otherwise. But if the time should ever come, and I do not concede any conflict to be even remotely possible, when my office would require me to either violate my conscience or violate the national interest, then I would resign the office, and I hope any conscientious public servant would do the same. That's what JFK said in September 1960. Now it's nearly 47 years later. Today we have an ambassador to the Vatican. The first was appointed by Ronald Reagan in 1984. We have President Bush's faith-based initiative, an executive order that established unconstitutional government aid to religious institutions. And we have a political landscape where candidates openly seek the approval of organized religions, and religious institutions try to dictate how their members should vote. We're here today to help reverse this dangerous trend of undermining our Constitution, and I encourage all of you to stay informed and contact your elected representatives on these and many other issues that threaten secular society.
Well, George, I would find it difficult to imagine a legitimate candidate for president giving that speech in today's times.
And at the time, I was quite young still, but I recall when that speech was given, and that seemed really to define for me and seemed very clear the separation of church and state, the role that religion has being subservient to government in the running of the country. And it is really amazing how far the American paradigm
in 47 years
has shifted in that time, yes.
In fact, in that part of the country would be the exact opposite speech would be given,
right,
on how to merge state and church instead of, but he was Catholic. He was the first elected Catholic president, and he had to defend his Catholicism in the South, who were mostly
right,
Protestants.
Right. I was reared a Catholic, and I remember my school friends telling me, if John Kennedy is elected, the Pope's going to move into the White House.
and it took Ronald Reagan to move the Pope into the White House.
Right,
Nixon did not even move the Pope in.
Ronald Reagan appointed our ambassador to Rome.
Yeah, and that stays.
Not ambassador to Rome, ambassador to Vatican City, I meant to say.
Vatican City, which is its own entity. Well, there was one other document that that we had a speech on, and that was in the early part of our country. There was a treaty with a country at that time was called Tripoli, and it was a Muslim country, but basically there was a request by the people from Tripoli to have in the document, and here's what it says. As the government of the United States of America is not, in any sense, founded on the Christian religion, as it has in itself no character or enmity against the laws, religion, and tranquility of Muslims, which were Muslims. But this was back in 1797, and it was important for our government to include in a treaty with these folks that our country was not founded in any sense on a Christian religion. And I had always been of the position that these folks were really kind of worried that the United States was going to wipe these Muslims off their country. But George has found out that some further research that had a different little take to it.
Right. It's actually based on an article that Christopher Hitchens published just a week ago. And it had some information in it that surprised me. It turns out that the United States was having a terrible problem with commerce, which was absolutely vital to the nation at that time. That our ships were being plundered in the Mediterranean by pirates from the Barbary Coast. And so in order to stop the piracy and permit our commerce to go on unhindered, the federal government of the United States under Washington and Adams was paying enormous sums in tribute to the pirates of the Barbary Coast. And it was 10% of the federal budget was being paid in tribute. Now, Jefferson was determined to end this at the time that he came to office. When Jefferson was ambassador to France, he had a meeting with an ambassador from one of the northern African states to protest Americans having been captured and sold as slaves. And the ambassador justified this, saying that according to the Quran, this is perfectly acceptable. They should do this to non-Muslims. So Jefferson was ready, when he took office, to take the pirates down. And he sent our naval force, including our leading admiral at the time, and did quite a job in North Africa. And this was praised as one of the most important events in defense of Christianity by the Pope, and was praised by Lord Nelson as one of the most important naval actions of the age.
And now this action came, Adams came after Jefferson, did he not?
No, it was Washington, Adams, and then Jefferson.
Okay, all right. So the Treaty of Tripoli and the history of that is really a way to appease a group of people instead of pay bribery.
It was an act of obeisance made to the Muslims of the North African coast to pacify them, to keep them from attacking our ships.
Well, maybe they should go back and take a lesson now. we could somehow or other end some of the hostility in the world today. So the founders had many other things correct. Now there was one thing that I always like to do whenever I go into a government setting of where I'm with elected officials, I always carry with me a pocket copy of the Constitution. You can pick these up almost sometimes in a lot of places for free, and it's always nice to have it with you, or at least to know what it says, because in it you'd find, like, the presidential oath does not have "so help me God." In it you would find that there is no religious test for qualification, and also in it it establishes the Constitution as the supreme law of the land. And was that really what we were talking about today at the Day of Reason?
Oh, definitely. In fact, a couple of those points were mentioned explicitly.
Yeah. Well, you had it in your opening talk, and other
yeah.
people went to it. So whenever sometimes it's nice to have with and just remind the folks that the Constitution is the law of the land, and it's not based on God, it's not based on religion, it's based upon reason. And it was put together with a group of people that were incredibly diverse. They were religious in many different ways, they were deists, and they were free thinkers, and they put forth a secular constitution. George, we only have a few seconds left. Anything to follow with? Or?
No, I think that the United States Constitution set the model that's been followed since by many countries for separation of church and state, and is being followed in Europe for the negotiations for the European Union Treaty.
Well, we have to wrap it there. If you'd like to contact us, our contact information will come up. We'll send you a complimentary newsletter. Until next time, we thank you for listening, and if you're interested in us, we're interested in you. Goodbye.